Hey everyone, welcome to Heavyocity's first roundtable discussion. We have three incredible guests that are all awesome guitar players and composers. As a fellow guitarist, I wanted to chat with some of my favorite players. Clint Lowery of Sevendust, Jason Richardson of All That Remains, and Andy Wood of Rascal Flatts. All three are incredible musicians and solo artists. We talk about all things guitar, composing, and production, so check it out. The first thing I want to start off with is like composing for you guys. And I'll start with Clint. So Clint, obviously you sing incredibly well. You've been writing in Sevendust. You have your own solo stuff. When you write an idea, like what pops in your head? Is it like a vocal melody? Are you playing around with guitar with progression? Like what's typically how like an idea is born?
Generally for me, the idea, it can be as small of a seed as just driving around and hearing a song that has a particular vibe that I like or has a production that I like. And that'll kind of send me off, kind of inspire me. Not always, but most of the time I sit down and put together the basic tempo. I usually, a lot of people are surprised when I say it, but I start off with a beat. I'll create some type of beat that inspires me. I was a drummer first, so I have a really good knack with just grooves and immediately just like bonding with the drummer. So it kind of, in a way, it's like I've had the pleasure of working with really good drummers, and I would just sit and tell the drummer, hey, throw a beat out, and let me just kind of noodle around and riff out on it. So that's kind of what I do now. I'll build the beat and I'll just kind of loop it and just write over it. Sometimes I'll just do the guitar riff, like when I'm noodling around. That's the foundation for the music. I'll start there. I'll create a verse, basic skeleton of an idea, start layering it, which is the fun part, putting the candy, the production, a lot of the programming type elements I've really been into over the last 5-6 years. So that's been truly inspiring. That's kind of a transition into Heavyocity thing. Has been such a great element, and a lot of times I get lost in the programming aspect of it, the strings, orchestral things like that, because it's just so beautiful and inspiring to me. And I've always been such a fan of cinematic, just composing, film scores and stuff like that. So it's just, to marry those two over the last few years has been truly inspiring, because I got a little bored with just the regular aggressive rock elements. I love the electronic aspect of that, and some of those sounds and synths, and just the things that are available today. It's just really inspiring. I'll end with this: 9 Inch Nails, Downward Spiral, the production elements on that, how they created a lot of those sounds organically, through like very old synths and the things that that Trent did with the producers then and Atticus now. That's just a huge thing for me.
That's awesome. Next up, Andy.
Yeah, I have really two ways of starting to compose and write. One will be a bit more schooled or formulaic or whatever you want to call it, where it's like, all right, I'm going to build myself into a corner. I'll say, okay, major scale with a flat 6. Now just start riffing around on that. Like I'll give myself a very kind of outline of, and intentionally not using my ears so much. I mean, it's kind of unfair because I can already been playing. I mean, all of us have been playing so long, we can kind of hear already what we're doing. But so, the idea of giving yourself some kind of little skeleton to work within, and basically drawing a picture and saying, don't color outside of the lines. Because ironically, that will make me be creative. When I have a full playground, then the chop sky starts coming out, and I'm not really focused on a strong melody or anything. I'm just like, hey, look at all this stuff that I can do. And building a bit of a box or a cage to live in helps me focus on the strongest melodic content, the strongest harmonic content, rhythmic content, right? So that's like way number one. Like I said, this is a bit more schooled. Way number two that I like to write is I'll watch a favorite film. I'm a big video gamer. I know Jason is too. And I'll mute the games out especially in some kind of cinematic area of the game or cutscene or whatever, or I'll loop that cutscene, find it on YouTube and loop it and put myself in the what if I was, you know, and that's a bit more of a hippie approach, right? Like that's a little bit more tie-dyed, you know, hey man, peace, love, let's just see what the vibe happens, right? But it's taking something visual, putting that into my input in my brain, and then muting out what the composer has done, muting out all the aspects of it. And I do that a lot on when I do my solo records. Every solo record has a song on it that's been written kind of in that format, inspired by video games, right? Like I'll just mute out the background and just let the visuals inspire me. So that's my two ways. And then of course from there it gets into, like Clint said, which amp is the right amp, which is the right, it's like then you're off to the races. But to me the most important thing is that initial little nugget, that little popcorn seed of what is the idea going to be.
Cool. That's amazing. All right, next victim is Jason Richardson.
Well, I never have like a right answer for this because there's so many options, if that makes sense. I never, like, whenever I'm giving lessons and stuff like that, whenever they ask me like about writing, I usually ask them like what songs in particular, making them ask that question, and then I'll be able to answer how I came up with that one in particular, because it's all so different. Like most of the time now, it doesn't start with guitar ever. Like I'm usually on the computer first, and then I'll get an idea for a guitar riff based off stuff that I'm messing with, with like a synth or programming, or maybe some pre-programmed like melody within like, you know, one of the orchestral things that Heavyocity has might spark an idea or something like that. That happened a couple times on my last album, where I wrote a guitar riff like based off some one layer in like Forzo or Vento or something like that. But yeah, like Tendinitis, that song, for example, like started with just like the main piano line. And then as the intro grew, I had this like arpeggiator that kind of ended up being the main riff in that song. I just figured out how to play what this arpeggiator was doing. I had to move some notes around octave-wise so it could be like actually performable, because the arpeggiator was like all over the place, like, you know, plus 12, 0, negative 12. So I was just like, okay, maybe I'll have to just do like a pull off and move one of those notes to a different spot within the octave range so it can actually be able to be performed on guitar. And then I figured out how to just meld all of these like different layers of programming into like one clean guitar part too.
That's great.
Things like that.
I was going to ask you specifically. I was listening to your second solo record the other day, and I don't know if I'm saying it right. Is it Threnody? Is that the name of
Threnody or whatever? Yeah.
Yeah, like you have a big orchestral intro on that, right?
Mm-hmm. So yeah, that's kind of, I have more of like an interlude in my mind. But yeah, that's just orchestra on that one.
Right. So like, not to get super deep in the weeds about it, was that one of the, did you go, oh yeah, let me work this out with a piano or like a French horn or something? Like, was the lead for you? Because when, like, real quick, if I'm writing something, we have a new Heavyocity product out and it's, you know, orchestral horns, I'm going to the French horn and I'm coming up with a line, and it usually inspires me to go, oh cool, and then I fill in the blanks. Is that sort of similar in the case of you writing that interlude?
Probably, honestly. I'm trying to, it's been a minute since I've listened to that one, but I think that one started with that piano part at the beginning, and then I kind of built the rest of it around that. I knew I wanted it to move a lot because it kind of doesn't really repeat. Yeah, because it's just it's meant to be like a lull in the album to kind of like give you like a break from like all the other chaos that's happening on it.
Right. That's awesome. So I wanted to ask Andy, because full disclosure, I've been actually studying with Andy for like 3 or 4 months. So I know a bit about what he's doing, and dude's a monster. Not that anybody else here is not a monster except for me. So Andy, I have some questions here. Hold on. I'm going to read them. I'm just kidding. Sorry. That wasn't even funny. So I know you play mandolin, and you started on mandolin, and you've talked about in your master classes how on your new record, which we'll get to, you've written some of those tracks on mandolin, and then you've had to transfer them over to guitar. Why would you start on mandolin versus guitar?
I wish I had a cooler answer than what I'm about to say, but a lot of times the mandolin is just so easily physically accessible. By that I mean it's like laying on the couch.
Okay.
And like I too want to lay on the couch. You know what I mean? So it's like and in truth it's like I'll sit down and I'm probably like everybody else in this room where I'll just sit down and mindlessly noodle when I'm not working on anything, like just to noodle on something. And mandolin is interesting instrument because it's tuned like a violin, right? It's all fifths. And it allows for things that are really hard on guitar. They're way easy under the fingers on mandolin. So like when you play a bunch of stacked fourths, like right now, Matteo Mancuso is really hot on the scene and he's doing a bunch of these stacked fourth things that lay out for his finger style. So on mandolin, you can do that on a 3-string set and it lays out really, really nice just due to the tuning of it. So that it wasn't just with the new record. I've been writing like that since my second record. And on my second record, the title track, The Truth and the Lie, is written as a mandolin tune, and it's a double album. It's on both sides. One side is all acoustic, and it's played as like a instrumental newgrass kind of thing, and then it's on the electric side played as a fusion tune, right? And it's based around like those fourths, and on guitar they're terrible because it's always one note per string. Fourths are always not fun to play. A lot of the tuning will guide that. Now the other side of the coin is just the nature of the mandolin. It's got such a really pretty bell like quality, and it's in an upper register, so sometimes I just want to hear that tonality, and I'll just get lost in just the way that sounds, and sometimes something will fall under the fingers and I'll go, hey man, I need to go back and like Jason kind of reverse engineer it to fit into another instrument, right? And Jason's dead on. It's like sometimes I'll write something on mandolin and it's like, man, something's got to move a little bit for it to be, not only playable, but, everybody in this room plays standing up. Like we're not just internet guys, right? So it's like, I want to not only be able to play it, I want to be able to play it live every time I play a show and it not fall on my face, right? It's like, so there is always that last little layer of, well, this one note's going to have to move somewhere. Like we got to figure out something, right? So that's a lot of reasoning and starting on that instrument. It's convenience, but tone is always like mandolin's just a pretty instrument when it's played.
That's awesome. It's definitely unique to your style out of the group here. So another question: I was watching an interview with Clint, and he mentioned cinematic, which you've already said initially that you love that vibe, and I think everybody here does. So I'll start off with Clint. Like everybody here has written a ton of material, with bands, solo albums. I love all that stuff. What do you see yourself moving towards? It may not be this year, next year, but in a few years, do you want to move into maybe scoring a film or getting into trailers or stuff that's more like Heavyocity centric? We do cinematic instruments, and so go. Yeah.
I'm absolutely, I've said it many times that is the course that I'm trying to get on. And the initial approach to that, there's been slow transitions as far as the programming and the software that I've discovered. And even as a kid, I was always fascinated with a film score, and I didn't even realize how much it affected me. Over the years, I would go watch a movie on tour and I would be like, I'm so inspired to go write right now, because it just pulls, like that music is completely generated to evoke emotion and change the course of the emotional journey you go on. It affects every scene. It's such a huge thing. So it seemed like a natural progression. I wish I would have gotten into it years ago, but that's absolutely where I want to go. It is humbling because some of the mentors that I've latched onto, it's incredibly humbling because there is I wouldn't say completely different art to it. Writing a song is great, and I've been well versed as everyone here. You know, we've all written a lot of songs, but there's something about finding the tempo mapping and linking up and building the soundscape. I have a lot of obstacles in my way because I'm not the best engineer. I'm not technically savvy with a lot of this stuff. So I play from feel. I've always been prideful of the fact that if it feels and sounds good, then that's what I'll pursue. So there's a little bit of a learning curve for me in terms of becoming an efficient enough engineer to really weed through the different the software and the different sounds that I want to incorporate and how I put those together and making sure the frequencies don't fight each other. And so there's a fine line for me in terms of when I do try to move into that composing part of my life, I just want to cut my teeth and learn the basics so I can move around efficiently in that world. Yep. And then rely, like now I know enough to write. I have a quick system to write a rock song. I can have a song done in an hour. You know, whether it's good or not is beside the point. I can finish it. With that, it's like there's just more to it. And I want to be able to be creative. And I want to be able to pull up my template that is already kind of organized in a way where I can work fast and I can see whatever scene it is and connect and immediately have ideas and have access to that gear and those sounds, you know, and then I'll see someone else that's at a high level work and I'm just so blown away. So yeah, absolutely. As an older man moving into this new territory, it's very scary, but I do believe I have something to offer. And one guy did tell me, he's like, just find your brand, your sound, your strength, and work with that. You know, you're not going to be better, you know, as far as orchestral parts, as a lot of these people. There's some brilliant people doing it everywhere, but find your niche and just work with that and expand through the years.
Yeah. I mean, I was guitar 24/7, and then like 25 years ago, I started getting into writing music for TV and picture and stuff. And, you know, my business partner, Dave Frazier, we go back to like Berklee College of Music. He was a pianist and he already got it. And I was like, I don't understand. And then it finally clicked. It's like, write a melody, pick an instrument, and it will flow from there. You know, you can use a woodwind or a brass. And like, once you have that hook and maybe some cool changes under it, chord changes that sound cinematic, you're halfway there. And like, you know, if you need help for, you know, somebody like to help you orchestrate, there are plenty of people that can do that. So I think that's sort of how I started, at least. And it sounds like you are super passionate about that stuff. I think everybody is. I was going to mention a composer that Andy and I were talking about, Ludwig Göransson, who did Oppenheimer, which was
young cat. You know what I mean? Like he's not only just new to the game, but I mean, like, dude's still in his 30s, and he's so far ahead of it. You know, in my mind, when I feel like John Williams has been 80 for 80 years. You know, I know that's not true, but it's like, yeah, you know, it's like,
he's been old as long as Willie Nelson has been.
Yeah. He's totally like Willie Nelson. Right. And Clint, you said some things that were interesting that I want to jump into. It's brilliant. Is like, you were looking at it from the engineering standpoint. It's also super humbling when you are laying out string sections and entire sections from a harmonic standpoint, right? I mean, all of us in this room are guitar players first. Jason likes to, I mean, I watch all your stuff on Instagram, obviously. Like, I love watching you take the scores and then re-putting them in, you know, into MIDI and stuff. But like, if you're starting from scratch, like laying out an orchestra and strings, super, super challenging. And I've got a good friend of mine named Eli Bishop. It's a lot, you know, it's a lot. And so like, Eli is a young cat in the game, and he's playing violin on these soundtracks for Destiny and these huge, you know, mega video games. He's in the orchestra. They actually record a lot of that stuff in Nashville, and so he's getting flown around all over the world. Like, he did the launch of Jason, what was the last Zelda? Trails of the King. What was the last Zelda?
Oh, Tears of the Kingdom.
Tears of the Kingdom. Yeah. So they flew him up to do the launch for that and play on the orchestra of that. So when I start hitting those roadblocks, I reach out to him and I'm like, okay, where do the violins need to sit if the violas are here? And those guys work on a different level of speed when it's like, oh, here, and he'll just staff it out on a whiteboard. He's like, that's what you want. And,
Right.
and that efficiency, like you said, Clint, dude, that's humbling. I mean, it hurts, it really puts the ego in check, man, watching that world. And then when you get a guy that has that level of harmonic knowledge on a huge orchestration level, get into the Heavyocity world, and they've got that same speed and efficiency, it just seems like they're limitless,
It's pretty wild. Jason, so I'm sure you've seen movies like Tenet. I don't know if you're a Mandalorian Star Wars fan.
Oh yeah.
Yeah. So same question for you. In the future, you're already sort of living in that world where you're writing these, sort of opus vibes. And do you think in the future you would want to score a game?
Oh yeah. I'm bored with guitar.
Well, I was going to make a joke. If the billion notes allotted to each man on Earth, that you're probably right there at, almost a billion used.
I want to catch up.
I mean, there's only 12. So
if you get paid by the note, Jason squandered a fortune, is what you're trying to say.
Hey, give me some notes.
There's always room for improvement with guitar, obviously. Like, I think improv is like my weakest point, but for sure, like, I could always improve on that. But yeah, I don't know. Guitar is just like one thing. Granted, it can do a lot, but there's like, you look at an orchestra, it's like 70 different things.
Right.
Or whatever you want it to be. So there's just like way more options for like creativity and dynamics and like all of that stuff, where guitar is just,
scoped within itself. It's almost the industry's to the point where it's like people are getting, you see it in product lines where it's like, oh man, here's a pedal that makes your guitar sound like strings and stuff. And I'm like, why would you use that pedal when you could use something like Heavyocity and actually be
right?
Mm-hmm.
Like,
I saw a really creative application to this recently, because when I just Aristocrats just came through, like Guthrie Govan, Brian Beller, Marco Miniman, all those dudes. And on their new album, apparently one of the violin players that is with Hans Zimmer, because Guthrie does the Hans Zimmer stuff.
Right.
And apparently she played this crazy part on the new Aristocrats album. And obviously she can't tour with them live, and they don't use a computer for tracks or played with, like, they're like raw as fuck live. Yeah. So Guthrie found a way to like emulate a violin sound with the Axe Effects.
With the Axe Effects, yeah, nice.
Yeah. Like synth block, and then he found some IR that's like for a violin or something like that.
Have that patch?
I don't have it. I mean, you can try and make your own. He said he found some IR on like a college website for a violin, and then just put it in like the capture block, and then it sounded pretty close. It was obviously, like futuristic, like cyborg kind of sounding, but you could tell that that's like what it was going for.
Wow. Okay. Yeah. That's crazy and awesome. Mm-hmm. Guthrie Govan.
Well, it's Guthrie, so.
I mean,
he's just, it's like, what?
He's upsetting.
I'm going to put, it's well said.
Yeah.
Like, I put this thing down and there's no point in playing.
Yeah.
Okay. So here's a question. It's sort of a silly one. When we're writing music here, it's often like we do trailer stuff, but it's often like, hey, there's a new product coming out. It's the, solo strings, solo textures, as it's called. It's the latest thing. You're writing a track. And I don't know if it was me or one of the other guys, but it's like you're working on it, and you're like, is it done? I don't know. Should I add more parts? And I think I said, when you hate it, you're finished. Which leads me to ask the question, do you guys, like write something, you're like really vibing on it, you're like, this is great, I'm excited, you go get a meal or you sleep on it and you come back and you're like, what the fuck was I thinking? This is shit.
Oh my God. You're like, there's never been a better explanation as far as my typical day than that.
Okay, good.
And as far as like finishing, everything that I've ever done is completely finished because I hate it all, really. But yeah, it's always the second guess thing. But I won't go on too much about it because I'm sure everyone's got some great, their headspace with this thing. But there's an insecurity that definitely kicks in after I put something together. My biggest problem has been are there enough elements? And this is regarding the instrumental thing that I'm trying to work on, which has been amazingly fulfilling to do, because it is like Jason said, it's not guitar, it's this new realm, and it's so much fun. And there's been, so much great, you guys are sending some crazy stuff. So when I'm writing, I'll get some new software. I'm immediately like, that's the new toy, that's the new thing. I'm learning about it and I'm writing around it. But a lot of it is just the second guessing just kills me. It's like I'm trying to put 5 or 6 songs out there to bridge myself into announcing that this is the world that I like to live in now. This is open up some opportunities maybe in that scoring world or anything, just composing in general without a guitar, and just the kind of, and I only get, it's like I want the first impression of that to be good. I don't want it to be like, oh, that's just some hack stuff and he's using these standard moves, and I want it to be special. But at the same time, I'm new at it, so I need to just allow this release to happen. It's not, I don't know if it has enough, there's always, did I populate that section with enough cool stuff? Is there too much stuff in certain sections? And so it's like analysis to paralysis.
Yeah.
And I struggle with it, but yeah, I'm going to put this thing out, and then if I don't like it, I'll work harder. If it makes me cringe to listen to it, I'm going to dedicate myself to the next project to making it better and filling in those voids.
Yeah, I think, like as a creative person, as a musician, there's so much emotion involved in it. And at least I can only speak for myself, but you have this like feeling that it's never quite done. It's not perfect. There's that sort of insecurity about how is this going to be received, because it's so emotional, like you pour your heart and soul into music and you want people to like feel what you felt. And I think that's a big part of it. Like why, at least for me, why I'm like, is this good? And then I'll have the guys come in. I'm like, I think this is terrible. And they're like, no, it's great. Or it's not good. Like they'll be very honest. But, Andy, for you, similar situation or?
I don't want to speak for everybody in the room, but I think you guys will know what I say when I know what I mean when I say this. It's like when I have a good music day, I have a good day. When I have a bad music day, I have a bad day. Like it's a full on, and having a bad music day can be one of a million different things. We're not going to go down that, but I actually am curious to ask Clint this. Clint and I toured together, 12, 13 years ago. I was in a rock band, metal band called Down From Up. And, we were trying our best to do the thing. And we had the going on at 12:30 in the afternoon when they would go on at 9 slot. But Clint, the interesting thing that's tied to this conversation is when you write something, I think we've all written something where we're fired up about it. And then it comes out and you get kind of burnt out on it. And then it's the life cycle of something. Like, what's the life cycle like when you wrote something with Butch on Seasons, that long ago? And it's like, and looking at it today in 2024, does it change in how it's felt? Like, does it feel like it's, is there like a cemented anchor in it, or is it still just that thing you're like, oh, I wish I'd done this different? It's like, where does that kind of mentality go? Because it basically, that's what we're talking about here, is like the life cycle of your music. And that can be, I made this at 12:30 in the afternoon and I come back on Friday and I don't like it, or I love it. Like, that's still just the life cycle versus what I was just talking about with 14, 15 years of life cycle,
Yeah.
Do you ever get past it?
It's such a great, like, I could really process that for a long time and truly try to give it a good answer. But for me, listening to those old songs, I go through the first wave where I write the basic skeleton idea, the musical idea that I present to the band and they accept it. I burn that out. I'll drive around listening to it. Oh man, that sounds cool. Let me go make an adjustment here. And then it goes through the band rehearsals when you kind of do pre-production, and then you make some changes, and then it goes through the production filter with, like, Butch Walker, for example, he was so much fun to work with in terms of writing. So I would fall in love with the song ideas after I had that first little burnout from the demos, 6 months listening to the same songs. Get with him, it gets revitalized. I feel good. it was a fun process. So the songs have a good emotional feeling to me. Then I hate them because I get burnt out, and I'm like,
touring them and playing them every night, right?
Yeah. And Seasons was a record where we're like, man, it's too commercial, man. We're going to lose our heavy audience. And looking back at that now, I could absolutely care less what people think in terms of is it heavy or not. I'm like, I'm going to make it for me, and hopefully people will dig it. And but I would be a lion if I said it didn't bother me. But yeah, it's and so to fast forward many years later, I'll listen to these songs. I'm like, there was a vibe there. Now it's about just looking back at that particular time frame in my life, how excited I was about music, how annoyed I was at that early like stage of my writing. Like, man, what were you? That was so simple, and you could have done so many more things with it, but I do appreciate, like, that's the timestamp for that particular part of my creative journey. And I look back at a lot of the old songs fondly, like, because it was what it was. But listening to our first record is like nails to a chalkboard to me, because production's the worst. There's a couple really cool core songs, but it's just a production. Even back then I didn't like it. So it didn't age well. But
the songs are great though,
I want to know what Jason thinks too, because Jason, I remember when you kind of exploded onto the scene, and like, obviously you've not been around for 20 years, right? But like, your growth has been interesting to me as a fan or whatever. It's like just watching how wide your stride is from one thing to the next. Like, I think everybody on the planet when you came out was like, oh, this guy can play every note on the guitar, right? And it's like, if you'd have kept making that same thing over and over again, I don't want to say it's not cool. It's just like it's eating cheesecake at every meal every day, right? It's like you lose it. When was your journey a conscious thing, or was it more just oh man, I'm just, like you said, just kind of bored of guitar? Like, I want to know that same thing from you.
Well, you guys know there's only like so many ways to play the same arpeggio. It's like, it's just 1-3-5 over and over again. There's only so many ways you can do that. So trying to like stay in that niche that like people know me for, but like not have it be the same thing that everyone else is doing. Like, that's how I've always thought about it. Even back, I kind of like started thinking about that when I first learned how to play it. From when I was like a teenager and stuff. Some people would probably argue that it does all sound the same. I've seen those comments. Like I said, it's just a conscious effort trying to just not just go straight up and down some of that stuff. And I'm kind of getting stumped a little bit, if I'm being honest, trying to answer that adequately. That happens to me a lot, even with lessons. I tell them that just like right up front. Like, I don't really have like a right answer, because at least with writing, because there's so many options.
Yeah, but your stuff, man, I was listening to everybody's stuff prepping for this, and your last album, it's really heavy. Like, forget about the insane guitar stuff that you're doing on top. Like the rhythm section with Luke, it's like melt your face off, tight, just super heavy. It's Thanks. Awesome. It's awesome. It really Thanks, is. Man. Like, and then you're shredding like 3 people on the planet can do on top of it, so it's awesome.
Thanks. I always try to keep in mind too, like some of the songs are obviously longer, but I do regardless of how crazy something is, I always try to keep a generic like pop structure in mind. So there's some sort of hook that people can attach to, even if it is a crazy, like insane hook or something like that. And also keeping in mind, like, if no one's ever heard something like this before, they're not going to get like completely put off by it at the same time, because of how over the top it can be at times. But even like some of the John Williams stuff, like from Harry Potter and all that stuff, like if you dive into it, it's there's some instrument somewhere in the element of the entire thing that's just going completely ape shit, like from start to finish. But it's fine for them though.
Yeah.
Me and my girlfriend were just it's musical when they do it.
Yeah. Me and my girlfriend were just down at Universal and walking through the park in the Harry Potter area. They're just piping in the Williams score,
Yeah. Mm-hmm.
But when you're walking through a park, a lot of times they'll have the areas in like 5-1 or whatever. So
Yeah.
when you a certain area, you're hearing more of the brass or another set. So walking through the park, I'd like end up over there where like the piccolos and flutes were, and it's just like I was like, man, if you did this on the guitar, like people would look at you cross-eyed. But if you're wearing a tuxedo and you're playing a flute, it's completely okay.
Yeah.
Yes. Nobody ever complains about that, you know?
Yeah.
It's a double standard.
Going through that Harry Potter thing, because I'm going to do like a little I think I want to do or like an EP of like some covers where because you know you can't just take the fucking like London Symphony recording and put your shit like guitar and bass over top of it and upload to streaming. That's super illegal. So if I want to do that, I have to recreate the entire things. And I've had in my mind that I wanted to do that for a while. I just kept procrastinating it because reading music is kind of annoying. But I kind of just got over that and bought these Leonard books where I literally have like the whole thing like right here that I've just been
out. That's awesome.
Looking at, because the answers are all right here. Like, if you want to know what's going on, it's literally just there's that one part you were talking about.
Yeah, exactly.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Yeah, and then the whole thing, even though like there's the main line that like the Celeste is playing, that is like the melody that people know from Harry Potter, but throughout as the whole thing builds, some instrument somewhere in that entire 5-minute piece is playing 30-second notes up and down like crazy somewhere. Yeah. And then there's some other line or some other element playing like the main motif or like the melody.
He is the master. He is just a genius, you know?
Yep.
So segueing from the comment about how heavy your solo album is, let's talk about what you're doing right now. Can you talk about that?
Oh, all the Remain stuff?
Yeah.
Yeah. That's a bit of a fun challenge for myself. Like I'm a lot like obviously there's elements in All That Remains that's, blast beats at like 220 plus where I have that option to put that in there, but it can't be like the only thing the entire time. So it's been fun trying to like limit myself to like try and make it like still like satisfying for me to write, but also and play, but still cater to like, because they have like 9 albums. Or this is going to be like the 9th or 10th album now. Right. So it's, pretty established fan base that can go all the way from, like I was just saying, like 220 plus blast beats and screaming to like What If I Was Nothing, which is like, a radio rock ballad that people get married to.
Yeah.
Like they would literally play that song at their wedding. They've told us that like multiple times. But so yeah, it's just fun trying to put that limit on myself. Like I finished another one that's like, so we have 2 songs that are in drop C, which is also the first for the band. But they sound drastically different from each other. Like one is like kind of more what sounds like it could be like straight off Fall of Ideals. That album that really made the band pop. That's got like This Calling and 6 on it. And then there's another one where it's literally just like I was honestly I hate writing sometimes because sometimes you like work on something for like over a month and then you don't finish it for like a year or you can come back to it. And then in other times it takes like 2 days to pump out like the best song on the album.
Right.
Yeah.
And it's just like, why can't it always be like that? Like, it's just insanely frustrating. And one of the ones we just finished was like that. Like, it's like a 4 on the floor riff. It just barely moves from like the first 3 frets. And it's just like a good solid riff. You know what I mean?
It's the life of a composer. Yeah. It's just So Andy, you have a few things percolating. You want to talk about what's coming up next for you?
Yeah, man. The big one is my new record is coming out hopefully April 26th. The reason I say hopefully is like I'm actually just sent some contracts over to my lawyer to have him read through. Might be doing a nice distribution deal that those things can level up things pretty healthily. But Jason and I have talked a little bit of business at the Petrucci camp. It's just, you want to always maintain your own pub and your masters and all these things. You don't want anybody taking that stuff. Anyways, that's my next big one. A really fun situation. You guys know I work with Gary LaVox and the Flatts guys. We did this thing. It's a TV show called The Song, and usually they'll put an artist and then writers, especially if the writers are musicians or singers, and we'll all get in a swanky TV and play the song live. And not do the ACM CMA thing where you miming it, right? Like we're actually playing it. And they air that show on different channels, but when we did it, I think Hard Rock is one of the big sponsors. We just did one with Jeffrey Steele. Jeffrey's the guy that wrote all like What Hurts the Most and those, the mega hits. And so there was 2 songs that Jeffrey wrote that Gary sent us like a day or 2 before, and it was not, he just said he wanted to do them. We didn't have any version. So Jim charts it out. Jim's fantastic, North Texas guy, and he charts it out. Like we do one run through without Gary, and then we just start filming, and that song just blew up online. So they're rushing us in the studio on the 18th, which is next week, to cut those 2 songs. And I the reason I'm saying this, I've played on a lot of stuff, but songs like this usually go to guys like Dan Huff, or like Landau or something. So the fact that I'm getting to do this kind of session is pretty fun for a guitar nerd like me, because I grew up worshiping Brent Mason and Huff and Lukather and the studio cats, right?
That's awesome.
So I'm getting to do like the full thing, and
you're the new guy. You're the new
guy. I don't know about that. I'll hold the chair until somebody better comes along, But like, it's really just as a fan that like I said, it's like that's a session that shouldn't, I never put myself in that kind of echelon or whatever, but that's really fun. And then of course our Woodshed guitar experience that we've been doing, this is our 5th year. It's a big anniversary year for us. And we've had all kinds of sick players. We've had, Bonamassa, Robin Ford, Eric Johnson, Andy Timmons, Tosin. We've had all kinds of players. Nick Johnston. He's another guy that I'm sure is the right kind of guy for something like this, because he does so much cinematic stuff on his records. But, this year we've got Steve Morse coming, and as a guy who grew up on Dixie Driggs and Colonel Bruce Hampton and all that stuff, I'm really hyped about Steve. And obviously this is an open invite to the 3 of you guys. Come, we'd love to have you, and be there. And if you just want to come and hang, like Jordan Rudess last year, you guys know Jordan got into guitar over COVID, is like just kind of something.
Oh yeah, I've given him a few lessons.
Yeah, same, right? And then he's like, great. So he hits me up and he's like, this was last year. And he's like, hey man, can I come? And I was like, he's like, I want to be off the clock. I just want to come and hang out. And I was like, yeah, absolutely. So this is my invite to you guys this year. If you want to come, just come and hang out. And then, in the future, if you guys ever want to, perform at it, of course, I'd love to have you and host you in that aspect too. But those are my 3 big things, man. New album cycle. Really excited about that. This album was a passion project because I didn't use any software instruments at all. And I did everything the hard way just to put the spikes in my head. And I did full orchestra, Eli did the strings, and I worked with a guy named Zach Zinger who does the music for like Elden Ring and some of that stuff. Zach plays a bunch of these ancient instruments like shakuhachi and koto and stuff. And he put that in on the record. And
actually just use both of those for something.
Yeah, it's like, and when you hear it and it's real, it's like, software stuff is where the future is. But I think it was more of just a personal thing. I was like, I'm going to do this one time in my career where I don't use any. I do it the hardest way that I can. And I think it was just like a crucible pilgrimage type of mentality before I shift into software stuff, just so I can know how difficult it is to do. And really appreciate and love how convenient it can be, right?
Yeah.
I think that was
that's what I was going to say. Just the fact that you'll have that foundational respect for what that is, and then having the accessibility to so many things through the software. That's cool that you're doing that. That's awesome.
So this record comes out, like I said, in April, and then the Gary sessions next week, and then Woodshed in September.
Have you announced the name of the record?
Yeah, the name is Charisma. So that's the name of the record, and it
Riz.
Yeah, the Riz. It's like, but it's funny, man. It's my COVID record. I started with like 54 demos, and every night during COVID, I would just come down here and have a bourbon or something, and I wouldn't let myself write any flashy stuff. Like that was like also like a self, I told you I write from those like building yourself into a box. I was like, okay, no guitar solos. You just are only allowed to write melodies, and you're only allowed to write double stops. I couldn't do big chords or anything. I was like, just if it's powerful, it will live. So I ended up with like 50 something demos of these like melodies. And so at the end of a year and a half, or however long COVID lockdown was, I took an inventory, and it was really easy to go through and pick out which melodies were the strongest, because they didn't have layers of doodads and production that I could have fallen in love with it was like naked. So then I could dial in and say, okay, these 11, now I can produce them. Right. So it was just an interesting way to write a record. Like Clint was saying, it helps appreciate the other ways. Right.
Yeah. On a similar note to that, one of the things that kind of helped me with my song Tendinitis, for example, I was actually, what started that, I was watching one of Hans Zimmer's master classes that he has. He said he's never written a main melody or motif at all, and anything he's done that can't be played without one hand on the piano. Like all of them can be played with just one hand. I was like,
I saw that too.
Brilliant.
I was actually hopeful. That made me feel great to have him say that.
Yeah, I just put my hand on the piano, and that first line in Tendinitis came out. So I just stopped watching it and started working on the intro.
It just goes to show that there's nothing more powerful, and there's not a plug-in or a piece of software or a guitar or an amp. There's nothing that's going to be more powerful than a good melody. Like a good melody is the most important part of the whole thing. You can put it in a voice, you can put it on a horn, you can put it through amps, you can put strings, but if the melody's there, it's there. And I think that's the thing when we talk about Hans Zimmer and John Williams and Ludwig and all these guys. It's like those melodies are hummable and recognizable. Like you go ask anybody down the street to hum Star Wars and they can do it. And it can be done single fingered. Like, what I mean? It's
they start out that way, and the beginning of it's very, very very simple and easy to grasp, but then it develops, and that's where it gets intimidating. Like the new Dune 2 soundtrack is like it starts off with these very simplistic beds, and then it becomes this just incredibly way more expensive than anything that I've ever done.
Who did the Dune soundtrack, Clint?
Hans. Yeah.
Of course Hans did it, right?
Yeah, I think he was writing that soundtrack while the first record was out. Like he had the first movie was out, and he was still writing, like sending the director like music cuts. He's like, oh, this is to inspire this, Dune 2, and like he was just on a mission. Yeah,
that's awesome. So Clint, to you said you're working on material now that's not guitar. Is it instrumental, or is it just not guitar and it's vocals? What's coming up?
It's all instrumental. Not to toot your horn or anyone there, but it's a lot of Heavyocity software, and it was just
toot away.
Yeah, I mean, it was so inspiring. I've had some stuff before, but I really I have this just amazing library of sounds now and just different things. So that was kind of the pushing point, and having access to that. And I'm like, I'm going to learn, I'm going to build this EP. So it's all of those type of sounds. There's one song that has one little verbed out guitar thing that's I use a lot of the damaged guitar thing. Like I just kind of play it like,
oh, cool.
Play out some of the melodies. But I actually liked Andy. It was the opposite, which is really interesting, because I was like, I'm going to do all of this reliant on software. It's such a crazy scenario, because what you were talking about, but I've also done that too. Like during COVID, I wrote like 5 songs it was like one guitar track, bass, drums, and a vocal. And it was a lot of fun, but it's really hard when you're come from a layering background like me. I love putting layers on things, but the EP will be all software and programming elements, and no vocals. Just some are very cinematics, 7-8 minute long droning things that I tried to put together an EP that basically is stuff that I like to listen to. When I work out or train or do anything, I drive around listening to this stuff now. I haven't put on any kind of, every now and then it'll be a rock or a hip hop or R&B record I'll throw on, but for the most part, it's been all encompassing, and I just like immerse myself into that music because I feel like it's good research, it's inspiring, it's humbling, and I just get ideas. So some of the songs are like that. Some are very, like Jason alluded to, the pop arrangement. There's like a hook that kind of happens over and over, but I try to stay away from typical songwriting format, but it still leaks in because every fiber in my writing body wants to have it compartmentalized into, okay, this is where the vocals, the verse, and this is a transition into the pre-chorus, and here's the bridge, which to me, the bridge is the Marvel highlight of the movie, like the Marvel Endgame when they're all fighting, and that's the bridge section of a movie to me. When that big battle happens or the big shift in the storyline happens. So, yeah,
That's great. I mean, I've always been a huge Sevendust fan. Like, I love it. When I mountain bike, it's like playlist is Sevendust, other song, Sevendust, other song, and more recently, I've been checking out your solo material. And man, it's super strong. It's great. That one track, Devil Leather, that like wow, 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 like that riff is totally sick. I love that.
Thanks, man.
It's cool.
I don't have these gentlemen here and yourself. You guys are incredible guitar players. And my guitar playing journey was I wanted to learn everything, and I was all in it, and I got kind of sidetracked and thrown off the path of really getting my getting my skills to a higher level. And there's a lot of me now that's trying to get back in there. I think I've even mentioned to Andy, like my heart is going back to more of the actual technical aspect, and I want to be a better guitar player. So, but that'll come after I get this next phase going a little bit. But I absolutely, just those elements, the riffs, I'll do a very simple thing, but I try to do some kind of little torque to it to give it, that's not just the standard rock riff. There's like these weird little bends and just things to modernize it. Yeah.
Yeah, which are pretty sick. I mean, you guys are sort of the OGs in that genre. Not to say you're the only band, but there's been so many other bands after you. And I think there's been a huge influence with what, Sevendust started, with like Morgan doing the, all the crazy vocals, and Lejean, and like just super melodic too, very cool.
I was talking to Mark from Periphery, and I was like, he was like, man, you guys like helped us. Like, I'm like, you're out of your mind, because everything, I said, you know what? I said, I'll give you this. It's the comparison of like a caveman invented this wheel to get something up the road. I said, you have the Ferrari, I might have been like some type of building block for what you're doing right now, but what you guys are ripping out, I assure you, is nothing like what we've done. You were light years. I'm inspired by a lot of these guitar players today. They're doing weird things with the sounds, and it's evolving. It's cool.
Yeah, but just to go back to what you guys have started creating and still are now, you've merged that like really heavy stuff and then like really melodic choruses. And I don't want to start listing bands, but there are so many bands over the last 15 years that have sort of taken that formula, and maybe there's more flash or whatever, but like your riff writing and those little like things that you do, they were just different, and like you have a style, even in your solo stuff. I know it's you know what I mean? And not in a bad way. It's just, you have this persona, the emotion that you put in your music and the things, the way you hear it, you can hear it in Sevendust. I can hear it. And in your solo stuff with the vocals. And I think it's all really great. So
thank you, my friend.
I just wanted to say that. So I was going to just sort of get into like influences, I know everybody here either had like, I know Jason's dad was a guitar player, Clint's dad. Oh, bass player. That's right.
Yep. Mm-hmm.
Sorry.
No, you're good.
Clint's dad, more of a blues player. I know Andy's, was it a grandfather that got
grandfather? Yeah.
Your cousin, like that's how you started mandolin, and your cousin was a fiddle player, and your background is pretty different than us in that you were like bluegrass was your life until you were mid-teens, right?
Yeah,
So,
I didn't even start playing electric guitar till I was about 17 or 8. Yeah, I heard the Brent Mason solo on Mark O'Connor's New Nashville Cats. I actually bought that record because Mark O'Connor is like my favorite fiddle player, right? Violin player, whatever you want. He can do anything. And I heard Brent's solo on that, and I was like, and if you guys hadn't heard that, it's a song called Pick It Apart. It's one of the most devastating pieces of just virtuosity I've ever heard on electric guitar. To this day, it's just mind numbing how clean and how fast and also articulate is really, and it changed my life. I mean, it really changed my life. And at that moment, I immediately jumped into electric guitar, like full in. And it was interesting because I had never heard like Roth era Van Halen. My first Van Halen I ever heard was Hagar era. And it's like that, like right now, it's the right now, right here, right now live. And to this day, that's still my favorite Van Halen tone is the right here, right now live with the pitch shift and the wet, dry, wet. And like,
that's so wild to me, dude.
It's crazy, right? It's like, but like I got into it and, man, it was literally I was 18 or so when I heard that. And it was 3 or 4 years later, I was opening for Clint's band. And, I was he'll tell you it's like all day, every day, just sit and practice. Like that's all I did. And then we would go on stage.
It is so good. I hated Andy. I hate Andy still, but I love him. He's such an inspiring guitar player.
That was my background. And it made electric guitar fun. Because I was discovering the stuff later, you know what I mean? And with different optic, I'd been playing music for 15 years.
Right.
First time I heard Passion and Warfare, which is usually the opposite, you usually hear that first and then play music for 15 years. Right. So yeah. Do that.
Well, like it's sort of like that was your Jedi training, the way I look at it, right? Like, because you weren't just messing around on mandolin, you were winning like state competitions and doing all sorts of stuff. Like you've always had that, like I'm just assuming, right? You've always had that passion for music and excelling and like, being in that world of bluegrass. Like everybody's ripping stuff, like just being on the master class, and there's sort of a mix of, guys that are into bluegrass or country and then guys into metal like me. And so the classes are split up and I'm like, I don't know who this guy, like I made a joke in the comments, like we didn't get that on the radio where I lived, but like some of the stuff he's playing, I'm like, wow, like crazy good stuff, incredible, like technical playing and musical, and just not being exposed to like that type of music just based on like geographic location, right? I'm Northeast guy, but it sort of opened my eyes to other players, and it's super cool, so I know you got to go in a minute, Clint, but let's talk a little bit about sort of the genesis of you gravitating to guitar and really like what pushed you into the metal.
I grew up very much into guitar because my dad, but like I said, I started on drums, but I did all the traditional things for my age group. So I got in Jimi Hendrix. I remember staring at that album cover, Axis Bold, staring at that cover like for hours. And then I listened to my dad's music a lot. He was kind of a Jimi Hendrix guy at the time. A real funky guitar player, really, really natural guitar player, singer. But, and then it was, I remember being 9 years old, and I talked about this the other day. 9 years old, I met my best friend. We actually moved into a neighborhood where literally my future lifelong best friends had an older brother, and they were in rock bands, and we joined our forces, and there were all these drummers in the neighborhoods. You could hear them playing in their garages, and you would just navigate and ask, hey, you play guitar, you listen to Iron Maiden, Judas Priest. But I remember buying my friend, he wanted Ozzy Osbourne Diary of a Madman record. So I bought it for him. I had no idea and listened to it. I remember immediately connecting to Randy Rhoads, the sadness and the classical overtones that he had. And I always loved the minor key, you know, and that's kind of funny Spinal Tap thing to say, but I was like so moved by Randy Rhoads, and I had no idea who Ozzy was. So I was like Andy, I had to backtrack. I listened to, there was a guy pulled in Trans Am to the bus stop with the AC/DC Back in Black blasting, and I'm like, who is that? And who's that guy smoking the Marlboro Reds? You know?
Yeah, totally, right. And it's super cultural to the South too, right? Like,
absolutely, man.
Totally like a thing where we grew up.
100%, man. You know, and then it was like all the bands like Iron Maiden, and then I got into the more technical aspect of stuff. I got into Stryper, and because they had great tones and some harmony solos I loved. And then it was Yngwie Malmsteen Trilogy, actually the record before that. And then Trilogy was if you can learn a song of Trilogy, you were like the best. And then, you know, Metallica came, and then it just evolved. It was never I love, you know, Slayer. A lot of my friends listened to that, and there was a missing groove element to me. That I loved the attitude of what Slayer was, but it was the thrash straightforward. It just never resonated. I loved R&B, and I loved within metal there were some tones that had a groove, and then when Pantera came out, like it's a perfect mixture of heavy and groove. So.
Well, it's funny with Slayer now that you mentioned them. They're like the OGs with, you know, like thrash metal, death metal, like whatever, satanic metal, whatever they were, right? And they're not as heavy. I mean, they still have their brand of heavy. It's sort of like Black Sabbath heavy compared to new metal. But I was watching them. They're amazing. I can't say a bad thing about Slayer. I didn't grow up being a fan of Slayer. I was like, that's heavier. That's too heavy for me. You know what I mean? Yeah. Like, it wasn't my thing either, but like, I appreciated those guys, like Right Hands from Hell, like, you know, for hours. And like now there are so many bands like Meshuggah and all these other bands with the Cookie Monster vocals that are so heavy. It's almost like my kid's a metalhead, Ryan, my older son. And like, he's like, Dad, check out this Russian singer. And it's just like, you know, the music's cool and it's heavy, but I'm like, after like 40 seconds, I'm like, can we listen to something a little less rip your face off, you know?
Yeah, I love that too. The alligator roll vocal thing that they do now, it's like, it's like, what?
It's like a huge thing. So, okay, sorry to keep you waiting, Jason. So the same question to you, you know, influences. I know your dad was a bass player. Mm-hmm. And obviously I have watched some of the interviews, so I know that you are already into Dream Theater, and you mow the lawns. You know, I don't want to tell your whole story, you know, to save money to buy your first real guitar. Like, you're at a level that's very, very few people are at. You know, like when I was in music school, Satriani came out, Vi had like Flexible, and those were the really cool ones. Then Yngwie came out, and I wasn't a huge fan of that, but I really liked Tony McAlpine because I thought he was a little more melodic. You know, and that was the thing, like shredding, you know, late 80s. What drove you to like want to be at that level of shredding? Like, what was the appeal for you?
Honestly, guitar was the fourth instrument for me. And it just ended up working the best out of everything I tried. And I realized that. So I just kind of stuck with that and like put all my eggs in that basket. But yeah, before guitar, like very first instrument I started learning was piano, which is great for anyone that, you know, wants to be a musician. Like it's way, because I didn't realize later, because I learned how to play it, but I didn't learn like theory and stuff like that. Like that was when I was like a real like little kid. Like I wouldn't even like really be looking at the music. I'd be like watching what their hands are doing because it made more sense to me at the time. I guess like I could just watch what you're doing instead of trying to read this like nonsense on a paper. You know what I mean? But as time got on, like I started learning like, you know, all my modes and like things about like seventh chords and stuff like that on guitar, not necessarily on the piano first. And I was doing things like backwards in my head. Like I was looking at everything on a guitar for theory mentally versus a piano, which is like usually like now in hindsight, that was like completely backwards. Like it's way easier to see how things work theoretically on the piano versus the guitar.
Right. Where you can play the same note on like 19 strings. Right?
Times, yeah.
Yeah.
Right.
There's like 7 different spots to play the same E in the same octave on a guitar on a 6
And then
string.
they got to go tune it. They got to go tune it all messed up right on the B string. Like, who thought of that? Like, that is no help to anybody.
Yeah.
But yeah, well, so like Petrucci early on was a big influence for you, right?
Yeah. Yeah, I would say so. Because when I found, or actually, if I had to narrow it down to just like 2 dudes and 2 albums, it would be Petrucci, Dream Theater Train of Thought, and then Alexi Laiho, which is Children of Bodom, the album Fall of the Reaper.
Okay.
Yeah, Richard. I don't know if you guys are familiar with that.
I don't know that.
Bodom or not, but it's like I was obsessed with Crazy Leads was matched with Sense, and both those albums had like tons of that, like everywhere, like dual harmonized leads, like, and that's between the keyboard and the guitar, and that was like a thing I was just obsessed with and wanted to do. Could never really find a keyboard player that could pull stuff like that off locally where I live, so I just learned kind of how to like program it on my own.
Right. Just call Jordan.
Yeah, I actually just hit him up. I think he's gonna play piano on like an intro thing, because I was like, for the new All Remains album, he had me like write out a chart and everything so he could just do it quick. I actually think he said he's gonna try and do it today or tomorrow. But yeah, I was just messing with this thing for an intro for the new song. Mike wrote this really pretty acoustic thing on a Taylor 8-string baritone. 8-string meaning it's a 6-string guitar. Mike's not that complicated. He's not gonna. I had to like fight to try and get him to get a 7-string just for like playing stuff in B standard on a couple of these new songs instead of just pitching his guitar down. But yeah, 8-string baritone, like it's a 6-string, but the 2 middle strings are like a 12. So it gets this really like, I don't know, just depending on how you play it, it makes it sound like way more up and downy and like just unintentionally more creative, if that makes sense. Just because of the way the instrument works. But yeah, I was messing with piano stuff and I just asked, I was like, you're way better at this. You want to do this? And sounds like he's into it. So that should be super sick to hear. But I wanted to write songs was the main reason why I started playing guitar, because drums was my focus at the time that I discovered Dream Theater.
Right.
So I was trying to learn all those songs on drums first off Train of Thought. And then I realized I can't write songs unless I know how to play an instrument with notes. So just started trying to learn all that stuff on guitar, like Master of Puppets and all the Metallica stuff and all of that kind of shit. And then I started taking lessons like a year in, like 10 to 11 months of taking guitar seriously. I started taking lessons. And so I had like forearm. I was like trying to shred like this, like using my entire arm, like all those bad habits and things like that. So I was able to thwart that pretty quick without, like years of muscle memory development. And in hindsight, that was huge. Like,
could you imagine like how big your bicep would have been if you kept that up?
Oh, my arm would have just fallen off. Like my tendons would have just evaporated.
Of course.
Yeah. But that was the main reason. I wanted to be able to write stuff like that. So I just started learning more of it on guitar and like other instruments and versus just drums, so I could make shit that sounded like that. I'd just be like, I want to be able to do that, was kind of like my thought process. So
okay. Yeah. I love it. That's awesome.
I'm sorry, boys. I gotta run. I'm gonna be late if I don't leave right now.
Yeah, go do.
I hate it. I could sit here for 3 hours, man. I'm so sorry. Neil, thank you, bud.
Thank you, man. It was a pleasure and honor. Thank you.
Same here. I'll be hitting you up. Thank you, brother.
Both of you have written so much music, right? Like instrumental albums. You're working with All That Remains. Andy, I read that you played with Scott Stapp and Sebastian Bach. And then you were talking about playing with this metal band, and you've done, now this will be your 3rd solo record, and you play your 4th. The one is live, right?
No, 5th record, 4th studio.
Who did the homework? No, it was me. Sorry about that. Anyway, see, the point is that you guys have both done a ton of material, and you're always working. So I think I know the answer, but what do you guys do to like unwind?
Something that's been this is probably gonna be kind of funny. It's one thing, but it's like nostalgic and been long running for me since like my parents have been watching since I was a little kid. Law and Order. Like I fucking love Law and Order. I'm literally not kidding. Like the fact that they're doing like 3 of them now. Like they brought the OG back.
Yeah.
For new seasons, and now Stabler's back with Organized Crime. They're on like the 4th or 5th season of that. Like so, whenever it's on, there's like 3 hours of it. That's like I love that. It's so
that's
sick.
awesome. Yeah. I used to watch
other ones, but that one's I don't know. It's always funny. I like true crime shit. As for like background noise.
It's nice.
Yeah.
I used to watch Miami Vice and just sit and noodle. You know, I'm a little older. Just back when there were no flat screen TVs, you know. So Andy,
I still have a CRT because I have all the retro video game stuff.
Oh, there you go.
Yeah,
that's cool. Andy, what are you into?
I'm a big gamer as well. And I know I mentioned that earlier. And I've always been into sports cars, and so that's always a thing that.
You're a vet guy, right?
Well, ironically, I've never been a domestic guy. I've always had I had a really high horsepower single turbo Supra, like the 90s one that everybody wants. And then I sold it after a breakup, and I regret it because the market on those cars is through the damn roof now.
And
so what are you driving now? When Corvette announced their plans for the mid-engine C8 line, I was like, oh snap, that looks ambitious. And then they announced the 5.5 liter flat plane crank and all this stuff, and I was like, oh man, I'm in. You got me. So and where I live, I'm really close to a lot of mountains, and so the driving is really good. Even if you want to be leisurely, the driving is really good. Beautiful scenery.
You can drift right around the mountain.
The whole point of the mid-engine is not to drift, you know. It's
okay.
You know, but I'm into that pretty healthily, and you know, and I wish I had more free time. I would do a lot more things. Right now, I'm drowning in work. It's good work, but it's really when I have a few moments, I like to go out and drive, or I'm actually wearing the hat. There's a school that I went to out in Pahrump, Nevada, is the Ron Fellows racing school. I'm going to go back out there and do that. They're building they're building a really nice track about an hour and a half from here that I'm excited about. But yeah, man, it's just video games at night, usually around 11 o'clock. I will make myself stop doing whatever I'm doing, because if I don't, I will unhealthily, you know, at that point you're working with burnt ears, and you know,
right.
You're not getting anything done at that point. So usually about 10 o'clock, 10 to 11, I'll be like, okay, now all of this stuff has to stop and I got to do something else. And that's actually where I get kind of inspired. Like I was saying earlier, it's like, man, a really great moment in a game pulls me in, and then it may spark some kind of, you know, kernel of melodic idea. Right. But
yeah.
I'm a gamer nerd, and we've got a big gamer clan, and we play a lot of Destiny. That's one of the main games. But of course, being a car guy, I'm in on the Forza Horizon, all the racing games and stuff too. So
that's awesome.
Movies are good. I'm, you know, always like every year at some point I watch the extended edition of Lord of the Rings, and I'm excited to watch the show Shogun that just started.
Yeah, I've been meaning to start that.
That looks really killer. Yeah, it's the same thing, Jason. Like I want to do it when I can sit down and have. I don't want to do it while I'm scrolling and answering emails and that kind of crap.
Yeah, same with like video games. Like I wish I had more time. Like I just don't have. Like I've been trying. Like in this since the new Final Fantasy came out, the part 2 of the 7 remake. Just been trying to like squeeze that in like when I can. Like I'm like instead of like coming home from like this, because we're doing drums right now for the new All That Remains, and like I have to be like pretty mentally there like while Anthony, the new dude, is tracking all of this stuff. Obviously, you know, it's way more taxing for him, but you still have to like, being the one that's written at least these couple songs that we're doing this time, like I'm just trying to be like make sure everything is good. Like it's definitely, even at the end of the day, like even though I'm not the one playing drums, but when I get back home, just like mentally just kind of like, I don't want to do anything else right now.
Yeah, your brain is broken at that point.
Yeah.
Just side question on that, just out of curiosity. So when are you tracking to a click, and did you pre-record the guitar, or are you playing live with him, or how do you usually do that?
Oh no, it's all studios. Everything's done. He's just playing like the
Okay,
drum parts. Yeah.
gotcha. Right.
Hmm.
So you're like laser focused. Fix
Yeah.
that.
Hmm.
Okay, that
Yep.
makes sense.
Now, all the stuff
Um,
is pre-written and all the guitars are already done and edited and all that kind of stuff. It's not
okay.
it's yeah. Me personally, I've never had great success with just like being in a room and trying to write like with other people. It's
Yep.
like it usually always gets scrapped and there's like I don't know, it's like one of those I know other people have written incredible music that way, but me personally, every time I've tried to do that,
Yep.
it usually just ends up getting tossed or
Yeah.
it's like too many cooks in the kitchen, like
Yep.
can't like formulate an idea to its full potential to like present it if that makes like
Yeah.
I know
Yeah.
it can be done either way, but in my personal experience, especially with metal and this kind of stuff, like actually one of the
Yeah.
songs we're working on started with everyone in the room and I was just kind of like on the computer, like coming up with riffs and like programming drums just to like get the idea down.
Hmm.
And that one actually ended up coming out kind of dope, but it didn't really like turn into what it needed to be until I took it back home and was just by myself, like messing with it on my
Yeah.
own.
I totally get it. Like for me, I'm more of an introvert despite doing this kind of stuff. You have to drag
Hmm.
it out of me. When I write, like I don't want anybody near me. I don't want anybody listening. Like I want to just be with myself and experiment and not feel like, oh, yeah, like I haven't been in a band in a long time, but like that's just how I operate, like that's when the best stuff comes. And then I'll ask somebody to come in and say, hey, what do you think? I have the luxury of a couple,
Hmm.
guys in this place, Heavyocity HQ. So that's helpful. So last question, you guys are both endorsed by amazing companies. Andy, I know you're lifetime or close to Sir Master since
Hmm.
I already bought one because
Long time, man. Yeah.
yeah, they're amazing, amazing, beautiful guitars. So were you approached by John after he sort of saw you, or did you buy one first and it generated from there? Or
And that's a really interesting conversation and like really incestuous in a sense that like we were on tour with Sevendust when I got my first one.
no
I was
kidding,
playing a lot of Tom Anderson guitars.
those are
Um,
great.
so basically what I did, my family, we didn't have any money. My dad was a cop, but I'd saved up, bought that Supra. And so when it come time that I was really going to take my career seriously, I took out a line of credit against the Supra. And that's what I went and I bought a Diesel Herbert, which is that one. It's still there.
Okay,
And
okay,
I bought a 412 and I bought two Tom Anderson drop tops. And I still have one of them. I still have the red. I should have shown it to Clint. I was like, dude, do you remember this guitar? It's like, yeah. But anyways, they were 22 fretters. And Guthrie had just popped onto the scene, and I'd heard that they were going to do a 24 fret model with Sir, and I knew Sir's quality was very similar to Tom Anderson's, in that
yep,
heat level. Same way with Ernie Ball, like just really great,
yep,
you know. So I had made this was, right at the tail end of MySpace. I'd written a song that was, I'm a big Guthrie fan, and especially at that moment in time, a huge Guthrie fan. I'd written a song and I didn't have a name for it. And it was obviously a Guthrie inspired kind of thing. And I named it Chelmsford because it's just like where he's from or whatever. And so, Ed Yoon was the A&R over at Sir at that time, and he had found it on MySpace. Like I think it got shared on like Rig Talk and Petrucci Forum and some of these places. And Ed's like, "Hey man, you ever want anything? We'll give you a little deal." And so I remember it being not much, 20%, 15%, something like that. So I saved up and I got that Sir. And when I went out to NAMM, I was gonna play in a booth for some other company, and they said, well, we'll just bring it to the booth and you can pick it up at NAMM. And I went in the booth and met John. Hey, how you doing? Oh, the guitar's great. And he's like, well, go in there and jam with Scott. And I was like, okay. I thought Scott was somebody, worked at the factory. I walk in, it's Scott Henderson.
Oh, geez.
Just like, so I sit down and we jammed and we had a good time. We jammed for about 20 minutes or so. Just, me getting my teeth kicked in by Scott Henderson. But apparently it left enough of a imprint where they followed up with me and were like, hey, just in the future, if you ever want anything, let us know and we'll continue to work on this relationship. Well, as my career did what it did, then Signature Models, and now we have a not only the guitar line, but we have a compressor that I'm really proud of. That's been really successful too. Yeah, I think you got one. Yeah, there it is. Of course, being a car guy, it's like Nardo gray, with the orange. Yeah, great. So that's the line that that we've cultivated, and actually, it's the 10-year anniversary of the prototype. This was the first 24. I wanted to play tellies. I noticed that a lot of the guitars I was playing, they had like the really nice tops, and every time I would see a picture of myself with it, I'd be like, that guitar is way nicer than I am. Like, it looks more expensive than I do. Like, I can't play that. So I said, hey, I want a telly, and I'd always been a telly guy, but I wanted to play like the moderns. And so we fabricated. This is the prototype. This one was done by hand. We fabricated the hill joint from the modern, 24 fret, and we put the neck pickup right next to the fretboard so it's as close to the proper position without having a wheel there or anything. And so this was the prototype. And this is 10 years old this year. So we're doing an anniversary model, an anniversary line. We're doing 2 colors, limited run to 50. We're doing 25 in one color and 25 in the other. But yeah, it's kind of crazy. Like, this one doesn't even have a serial number on it. Like, it was just a one-off, and it originally was just and this, it was much nicer. Like, I've worn it through from playing it, obviously, but yeah, nice. So we've got 4 colors, and with the new limited anniversary model, that'll be 6 colors. And yeah, it's a great company. I don't even feel like it's a company that I work with. I just feel like John and Kevin and all, they're family at this point. Like, it doesn't even feel like a company. It's like Sterling and the Ernie Ball guys. They have that magic too. Like, you don't feel like working with somebody. You feel like you're hanging out with people that are also keepers of the faith, and they still like guitar, and they still want to try things, and they still are trying to make things better, when they could easily rest on their laurels and go the way of other companies. You know what I mean? And that's the kind of people I like to be surrounded by. It's keeps you going.
Mm-hmm. Yeah. So I have a proposition. I'll trade you over $5,000 worth of Heavyocity premium virtual instruments for one of those. What do you think? Let's make a deal now.
I can help facilitate. I can't give you the prototype. So many people try to buy my guitar.
I don't want the prototype. Anyway, I'm only half joking. And then I want one. Anyway, so Jason, how did you end up with Ernie Ball?
So I got my first one when I was 14, and that just happened to be because I just wanted my favorite guitar player's guitar, and it just happened to be a music band. And I couldn't find,
right? Like, that was the Petrucci.
Yep. Yeah, I still have it. It's not in this room; it's downstairs, but I do still have it. The Pearl Redburst original one with the forearm scoop. Like, that was like, I got that when that was the only model out at the time. Right. Like, that was it.
They only had like 2 colors. They had the flip flop and the red, right?
Yeah, there was like the Mystic Dream or whatever, the chameleon one. Actually, I have the 8-string. The first 8 Majesty 8 that they did is in that color. And I think that's kind of why it was like a throwback, like ode kind of like to that finish, because I hadn't done it in a minute on one of his guitars. But yeah, I just couldn't find any of Alexi's anywhere in store. He had a signature model, but they just weren't in stores over here anywhere. So
right, it was like a big shark fin kind of thing with one pickup, right? Wasn't that what he played?
Yeah, I have one of those too. When he passed away, I got one. It's I think it's like a ripoff of the Jacksons or whatever, like this thing.
Oh yeah. Total 80s, man. It's so cool.
Yeah. This is everything I hate about guitars, but I love it. It's got a Floyd. It's got one pickup. It's got one knob. It's got a locking fucking nut. It's pointy. It's like all awkward and shit, but there's just like something to it that's just like
vibe, man. You know, some things just have vibe.
It's just a fun guitar, and it also I didn't want to settle for an LTD, so I had to wait like a
Yeah.
year and a half because they just didn't have any. So they like after he passed away, I ordered this one from them at a discount, fortunately, because I think these are like actually like stupid expensive. Like if you were to just buy an ESP, it's like crazy expensive.
That's crazy money.
Wow.
But,
Super cool.
But yeah, I'd always wanted one. So when he unfortunately passed away at the end of 2020, I just like, all right, I'm just gonna get one. And then Young Guitar interviewed me for his tribute issue. So I have like that guitar and that my interview from that magazine like framed up on my wall.
That's awesome.
But yeah, so after that, I joined All Shall Perish was my first touring band when I dropped out of high school when I was 17 and started going on tour with them. And they had a Ernie Ball endorsement for strings, and the old bass player played Music Man. He played a Stingray, and that's why I started talking to them from there. That kind of was like the initial intro, and then they instead of paying me for one tour, they just bought me a BFR, like an Amethyst one. I actually think that one might be over here still.
So you were eating strings on the tour? I mean, how'd that work out?
Yeah.
Yeah, it was this one.
I didn't eat a guitar.
No, I mean, they just, instead of like, I don't know, they were paying me less, whatever. It is what it is. There was a reason. Good dudes, I like them all. I'm happy they're having a comeback and stuff. But yeah, well, I should play this more.
It looks
but
beautiful.
Yeah, but this is the one that I got right at the end of that. And it's kind of weird seeing like the evolution of all these things over the years, because like the bridge has changed, like this isn't underneath the string anymore. Like they moved it out. Like there's this little nook like right here. You see that? Like that's changed completely. But yeah, so that was the first one I got like through like a deal, and then I just stayed in contact with them from there. Boo started when I joined Born with Cyrus. They all switched to Music Man, and then I think Derek told me, Derek Brooks, he told me they were at like a Dallas guitar show or something like that, like some random smaller guitar show. And people were coming up to him saying that they knew about the Petrucci models because of me and not necessarily JP. Wow. Not like everyone, obviously, but like enough people mentioned that they were kind of like, oh, maybe there's something to this. And that kind of like started the conversation of having a signature model. And then once I joined Chelsea Grin, they all started playing Music Man as well. And after I left Chelsea Grin and started doing my solo stuff, and that started, to take off. That's when I think they finally were like, all right, okay. And then the whole intent was to have the cheaper model, the Sterling one, but they don't design guitars. Sterling doesn't. Sterling by Music Man. They just take the Music Man guitars and make them at a more affordable price point. Everything's licensed to them.
Oh, okay.
And so we had to make the guitar in order to have the Sterling one. So we tested the waters with the 7-string. It worked. And then next year, I did the red one and a 6-string variant, and that all popped off and did really well. So, and now we have like, I think like 6 colors or something like that now. It's been like 5-6 years at least.
Awesome.
Yeah.
So yeah, I have an idea. I'll send you $5,700 worth of Heavyocity.
Well, unfortunately, before I got in contact with you, I had already bought everything.
That's great.
I had already had like everything.
You emailed me, dude.
At that point.
I was just going to say, I do have one Ernie Ball Music Man, and it's the 8-string.
Oh, the 8. Nice. Yeah.
When we did that Damaged Guitars, I did stuff in drop A, and then I was like, can we go lower? And so I listened, this was the best one. I was like, let's go low F sharp. It took me 2 days to like get an EQ curve to make it sound really, really chunky and tight, but it was a blast to play. On that note, I think we could probably wrap it up. You guys have been incredible. I'm so like pumped that you were into coming on and talking about composing guitars and Heavyocity and future projects and all this stuff that you guys have in the works.
I honestly think Heavyocity was like one of the first. I think it was like Damage and like the Evolve Mutations shit or like some of the first like Contact stuff I had like 12 years ago. That kind of like set me down this rabbit hole.
Awesome. So you're like an OG user, man. I love that. Thank you.
Yeah.
All right, guys. Well, awesome fantastic fun. Thank you again for doing this, and hopefully we can do it again.
Yeah.
Yep.
Cheers.
Pleasure.
Talk to you guys soon.
That's
Thanks
great.
for everything.
Man, take care.
Yep.
Out.